Not all employers will sponsor workers under the skilled worker or senior specialist worker routes, but it could be that they have other people in their employment that have a different type of leave to remain in the UK. So what types of permissions do people have that allow them to work in the UK?
Yeah, so there are lots of different types of permissions that somebody could have which enables them to work even though they're not sponsored by the organisation to work for that particular organisation. So really common at the moment is we see European nationals who have status under the EU settlement scheme, whether that's settled status, providing an indefinite right to work, or pre-settled status, which at the moment provides a time-limited right to work. There are also individuals who will have dependent visas. So, for example, somebody who's in the UK as a dependent of a student or as a dependent of a skilled worker or a dependent family member, all of those will have the right to work for your organisation, even if you don't have a sponsor licence to sponsor them.
And you mentioned students, so they can also work in the UK?
Yeah, so international students, and these are students who are sponsored by an educational establishment to study in the UK, generally have the right to work for up to 20 hours per week during term time and unlimited hours per week during non-term time. There's obviously additional evidential requirements that apply to students then in terms of establishing when is term time for them and when isn't term time. But there are some very good kind of recruitment strategies with students that can be applied. So some organisations, for example, will employ a student on a part-time basis whilst they're a student and then facilitate them switching into the graduate route once they graduate, and that will allow them to continue sponsorship or switch them directly into a skilled worker sponsorship. And there are benefits of switching somebody from a student visa into a skilled worker visa. For example, they would be eligible for the new entrant salary rate, which is a lower salary requirement that applies than that applies generally. And also, if somebody's switching directly from a student visa to a skilled worker visa, the immigration skill charge doesn't apply to them. So that can be a significant saving for the employer if somebody switches in that way.
And so if they don't switch straight into skilled worker, you said that there's a graduate route as well?
Yep, so the individual can apply for a graduate visa, and this enables individuals who have studied for a degree within the UK to apply for generally a 2-year visa. There's a 3-year visa if somebody studied at a PhD level or above, but somebody who studied, for example, a bachelor's or master's degree can apply for a 2-year visa in which they are permitted to either look for work or take up work in the UK, and that is a non-sponsored route, so the organisation that's employing them doesn't need to have a sponsor licence, and there are no salary restrictions or skills restrictions on the type of job that they're eligible to take up.
There's also been quite a new development in terms of students from overseas universities as well, being able to come into the UK to work.
So yeah, there's a high potential individual route, which is similar to the graduate route, but applies from graduates from leading global universities as opposed to UK universities. The individual must have graduated from the university within the past 5 years, and the university they graduated from must appear on the Home Office's list of globally recognised universities. At the moment, there are 50 universities that are recognised, and there is a list published for each graduation year. So you need to check against the list for the year that the individual graduated to see if their university is on the high potential individual list. There is talk about increasing the number of universities to 100. And at the moment, the vast majority of universities happen to be in North America, which means it's a relatively restricted visa route. But if the list does open up to the top 100 universities, it will be of wider application. And if the individual is eligible for a high potential individual visa, that stops the need for sponsorship. So you can employ them without them being sponsored. And they are generally eligible for a 2-year visa or a 3-year visa if they have graduated at PhD level.
And there are some options for citizens of Commonwealth countries as well that allows them to come and work in the UK. What does that look like?
So an organisation might find that they have somebody working for them under a UK ancestry visa, and that's a visa that's applicable to individuals from Commonwealth countries who have a grandparent who was born in the UK, and it's a 5-year visa and it's non-sponsored, so the organisation doesn't need to have a sponsored licence to employ somebody who's on that visa. Similarly, there's another visa type called the Youth Mobility Visa, which is applicable to individuals from certain countries, mainly Commonwealth countries, such as Australia, New Zealand. There's a separate route which is open for Indian nationals, and that's applicable to individuals who are between the ages of 18 and 30, and it gives them the right to come to the UK to work for any organisation in any type of role for up to 2 years.
And moving away from employees who work here on the long term, is it possible for someone to come over and do some work on a temporary short-term basis?
So if somebody's coming to the UK as a visitor, then there are certain activities that are permitted under the visitor route, but they are generally activities which do not involve being employed directly by a UK entity. So it will apply, for example, if somebody's coming over from an overseas group company and they are coming to the UK to have meetings here or to train UK employees on certain in certain skills and activities, then certain activities are permitted, but an organisation needs to be quite careful before utilising that route because, as I said, doesn't permit employment in the UK, it doesn't permit generally paid employment in the UK, so there are quite severe restrictions on what somebody can do as a visitor, and it's time limited, so an individual can only come to the UK as a visitor for up to 6 months at a time.
If you'd like any further information on the points that we've discussed, please feel free to contact myself or Shabana on the contact details that you can see on your screen, or you can find our details on the Walker Morris website.